Is the Afcon a major tournament? Jamie Carragher doesn't seem to think so. We're going to talk about all of that and more coming up next on the African Five-A-Side podcast. Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of the African Football Report on the African Five-A-Side podcast. I'm your host, Mahim Zahi, and as always, this podcast is brought to you by africasaCountry.com, where I'm actually writing about this entire fiasco. Is the Afcon a major tournament or isn't it? Some European television pundits don't seem to think so. Many African football aficionados vehemently disagreed online. Uh, if keep your eyes peeled on africasaCountry.com, and you're going to see my full article there very soon, either today or tomorrow, whenever this video is published or the day after. So let's talk about it. After Liverpool defeated Manchester City 2-0, Jamie Carragher was speaking, I think, about the fact that, Mohamed Salah had never won a Ballon d'Or. And he mentioned that one of the reasons why perhaps, and I'm quoting now, I think the problem for Salah is that he's with Egypt and he's probably not playing in a major tournament or one he has a great chance of winning. It's either the Champions League or a major tournament to win the Ballon d'Or. So for him, Champions League is obviously a major tournament. And the other ones he seemed to mention were the World Cup, the European Championships, and I think he even mentioned Copa America there. His co-pundits, Micah Richards and Daniel Sturridge, quickly countered, saying that the AFCON is a major tournament, but Carragher seemed to laugh that notion off. He went back later today and tweeted a thread out where he said, look, I didn't mean to seem disrespectful or to laugh that off. He just doesn't think, he doubled down. He doesn't think that the AFCON is on the level of the Euros and the Copa America. So what are we to make of all of this? I have a few points to make. Number one, initially I didn't want to talk about it because honestly, without any disrespect, I mean, the guy is a great defender, one of the great defenders in English football history, probably, with his longevity, the way he played for Liverpool. I have a lot of respect for the player. I don't mind the pundit as well, but who is Jamie Carragher to talk about African football? I mean, that's like, Micah Richards talking about Thai football. This has nothing to do with anything, you know? Um, Me personally, I remember when I making a food analogy. I remember going to Cote d'Ivoire early last year, saying like eating this acheke, this fermented uh, grain that they were eating in Cote d'Ivoire, and thinking to myself, this isn't that good. But everybody else loved it. And I have the humility enough to say, like, look, just because I don't like something, just because it's not my cup of tea, that doesn't mean it's not a world-class dish. And same thing with ugali in Kenya. Jamie Carragher doesn't have that humility to say, like, okay, I don't like watching the AFCON. It's not my cup of tea. Therefore, the real danger for me is saying the it doesn't take world-class player to try and help win the AFCON. You can't have world-class effort to try and win the AFCON. That's where the real danger comes in. But one thing I didn't like was the outpouring of outrage, really, from um, a lot of people on Twitter, Africans in particular, so journalists, supporters, just because I think it showed a little bit of an insecurity. Like, why are we that upset with Jamie Carragher's opinion about African football or the African Cup of Nations? It's one of those where if you know the African Cup of Nations, like we've all watched it for decades and decades, and I've had the privilege to cover four of them now, and I plan on covering my fifth later this year. If you watch the African Cup of Nations, you know its value, or if you go and if you attend the African Cup of Nations, you know that this is a major tournament. And it's not a major tournament because like many people said, online, like Yaya Toure plays in it, or Didier Drogba played in it, and Mo Salah and Sadio Mane played in it. Like, no, like the world class players are a part of what makes it very attractive and very special. But it's a major tournament because it means a lot to us. That's really why it's a major tournament. And as sappy as that sounds, as emotional as that sounds, and unsubstantial, really that is why it's a major tournament. It's because we love it. And because we love it so much and we like to share it with people, and we like to share it amongst ourselves, that's what's going to ensure its success in the long term. Because you can't rely on star players. Sometimes the star players don't show up. They'll be put under pressure from their club. Sometimes they'll be injured. And they're not going to show up. Think about Cameroon in 2017 when 8 players didn't show up before the African Cup of Nations. You can't rely on, like the football being the best all the time. Sometimes the football isn't the best. Last edition, it was fantastic. Um, what you always can rely on is the entertainment value. But sometimes, a few editions of the Afcon are boring, just like a few editions of every international football tournament can tend to be boring. Just the fact that we love it and we look forward to it and we want to watch it every year, that assures its long-term stability, at least on the continent of Africa. And that's the most important thing for us. We value it. And it's not just us as fans, it's the players as well. Last year, Mohamed Salah at the Afcon said that this trophy is the trophy that I want the most, more than the Champions League, more than the Premier League. The Afcon is the trophy that I want the most. He understands that his legacy, not for Liverpool fans, but his legacy with the people that he values the most, Egyptians, rests on the fact that he has to at least try to get one Afcon because he's competing with the generation before him that won three in a row. So like he's completely conscious of that, and that's why he's given himself and fully implicated himself in every single AFCON run, despite the fact that he's having world-class seasons with Liverpool. He stops that, and he comes and he tries to will Egypt to an AFCON trophy because he knows that in the end he's going to be judged on that again at home to people that he values the most. It's not Liverpool fans. Sorry to say, but it's you value your mother, your brother, your sister, your cousins, your friends more than. Don't get me wrong, he loves Liverpool, but he's always going to value Egypt more than he does Liverpool. And it's the same thing for everybody else. Sadio Mane, Riyad Mahrez. You can see what winning that trophy meant to them and how it transformed them. Sadio Mane, I remember prior to winning an AFCON trophy, was very, very shy. And after winning the AFCON trophy, was much more outspoken. Now, that could be just the natural growth of a man that was a young player that matured into a more experienced player. But it changed things, not just for Sadio Mane, but for all of Senegal as a country. There's a before and after winning the AFCON. That's what makes it major. It's not about anything else. That's what makes it major. So we know it's major. We don't need Jamie Carragher to tell us if it's major or if it's not major, or any other pundit really that covers European football. This isn't again like um, an African football expert like a Mark Gleason or a Michael Otiajai or Franck Simon or something that's saying this. Hervé Pinot, people that have covered the game for decades. It's just somebody that played with a few African players, really. That's all it is. Or this isn't even, former African players that are criticizing the AFCON. Now, the reason why I think we do need to critique it, and we do need to make a video like this and write articles about it, is because the one issue here for me is not Jamie Carragher's value if he thinks it's a major tournament or not. Like I said, we don't care about that. The one issue here is that Jamie Carragher appears weekly on CBS and Sky Sports. He is becoming, or he is, and he's becoming even more of a household name as the success of these shows continue to grow, especially the CBS one. So when he says something like this, even if me and you know that AFCON is major, maybe not everybody in Europe will agree with me and you. Maybe they have no opinion of AFCON, and all of a sudden they're influenced by Jamie Carragher's opinion of what AFCON is or isn't. And so as a result, that can feed into a narrative, and the narrative can have very material repercussions on players, African players playing in Europe. I think it's no secret to anybody that follows African football that overall African players are undervalued. That comes in the form of transfer fees, that comes in the form of player salaries, and that also comes in the form of individual accolades like the Ballon d'Or. If Jamie Carragher says AFCON isn't a major trophy, you don't even deserve credit for winning the AFCON. That's pretty much what he's saying. That shouldn't weigh in a Ballon d'Or vote if you win the AFCON or not. Who cares? That's pretty much what he's saying. It's like winning the League Cup for him, you know? If that is the case, and somebody listens to that and is a little bit influenced by that, maybe when Mohamed Salah, maybe let's say he finally wins the AFCON in 2025 in Morocco, and we know how big that is for his legacy and for him at home, and we know how difficult that is, and we know the kind of colossal efforts that it will take from him to win this trophy in Morocco. If he does that, maybe because of Carragher's throwaway comments, somebody that isn't paying attention is going to keep that in the back of their mind, and it's going to influence the Ballon d'Or vote, you know? So all of a sudden, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a catch-22. Because he doesn't think it's a major tournament, because he voices that opinion on major broadcasting platforms, maybe people aren't as educated, they don't pay attention to the AFCON as much. Maybe that's going to subconsciously affect their voting in the Ballon d'Or. Again, talking about transfer fees and player salaries, part of that is due to concrete reasons. Players miss time at the Afcon. I can understand a club saying, look, we're not going to pay as much for this player as we are going to pay for this player who we value equally because this player is going to miss a minimum of 8 weeks every 2 years. Minimum, right? Um, that's not considering, maybe he picks up an injury when he's over there. Clubs hate that more than anything, is when players pick up injuries with their national teams. And so on and so forth. And that's another reason why African players are undervalued. Another reason why African players are undervalued is honestly player representation. Either it's subpar for a lot of African players, or maybe the African agents that represent their African players, which is not always the case because many African players have European agents, but especially when beginning, a lot of African players maybe have African agents who aren't necessarily plugged into a lot of technical directors. So on one hand, there's not a lot of trust there. I'm gonna lift the lid on a few things. Maybe there's not enough trust to have, like, hey, we're gonna inflate this transfer fee, we're gonna have kickbacks and so on and so forth. Or yeah, like they're just not in the know with all of these technical directors and with all of these clubs. And so as a result, the player is going to be naturally undervalued. Um, but these kinds of opinions that Carragher is spouting eventually can have material repercussions. That is the main problem of what he said, in my opinion. We don't care how he values the Afcon. Doesn't mean anything to us. But the fact that he puts this on the airwaves on major television channels, that can subconsciously have material repercussions on African players. I don't think it's a coincidence that Ademola Lookman, is only valued at 50 million euros in today's economy, today's footballing economy. We could talk about the same thing for, Victor Osimhen. These players, we always say it, in Africa, but if they were Brazilian, if they were English, it's just the truth. The value rises. Why does the value rise? Right? So yeah, overall, I think those are my main thoughts about the Jamie Carragher thing. I was supposed to talk about Libyan football today, but unfortunately, the person who we were scheduled to interview pulled out at the last minute, and so there was nothing really else on the airwaves. I had to talk about it, but um, I understand being a little bit not angry but irritated by the comments. But I would just say, be secure because like Afcon is major. We know it's major. You don't need to say Afcon. You're shouting out on social media or at Carragher. Afcon is a major trophy. Afcon is that makes you just seem insecure. And again, it's a major trophy not because of the players, not because of anything else other than it's ours and we love it. That's honestly it. Um, but what you can maybe critique him for is you saying these things is going to have material repercussions on African players in the future. And so that, like I said, is a vicious self-fulfilling prophecy and a catch-22. So until then, let's kind of focus on what truly matters. Mohamed Salah's historic run. I think we are well on our way to having our second ever Ballon d'Or winner. Inshallah, hopefully he just stays fit and continues to have the same vein of form because it would mean a lot for the African continent to have a second Ballon d'Or winner after George Weah in 1995. And let's enjoy the African Cup of Nations. Let's show it the love that we say we love it. Engage with it. Go to the Afcon if you can. Watch all the matches. That's coming up at the end of the year. I know you don't need me to prompt you to do that because we do it naturally, but these are things that we can sort of do to enjoy African football and to sort of put our money where our mouth is. Anyways, until then, speak to you guys this weekend, and yeah, take care. Peace.